Hello, friends, and welcome to Nobody Knows Anything. I'm Jesse Larrick. It is currently 2:30 a.m. Eastern on Wednesday morning, August 5th. I just wanted to record a little topper for you guys with the absolute latest out of a crazy election night. At 2 a.m. Eastern on Wednesday, Abdul El-Sayed finally declared the winner of the Michigan Senate race, outlasting Haley Stevens in what turned out to be a much closer race than many of us expected. Also, in the wee hours of the morning, Will Lawrence, progressive candidate in the 7th Congressional District in Michigan, he was declared the victory over two center-left candidates, which you'll hear us talk about on the episode. You know, really chock full of interesting conversation with some of the smartest people in the Democratic Party and beyond. We've got AOC Comms Director Lauren Hitt, former Haley Stevens advisor Caitlin Legacki, Republican strategist Liam Donovan, plus journalists. We got operatives on the ground at Abdul El-Sayed's victory party. We got it all. Just wanted to give you a little context on what you were going to be listening to, which again was recorded, over the course of the evening as results came in, before we knew that Abdul El-Sayed was going to prevail in this close race. Tons of great conversation, though, about the direction of the party, where everything is headed, what it means for 2028, and much more. Hope you'll enjoy the show, and just wanted to make sure you had the absolute latest news here, because that's how we do it at Nobody Knows Anything.
Nobody knows anything.
Well, Jesse, we are live, baby. We are having a great time here doing. This is really what the show was built for. These
It
live
really is.
events where everybody is just watching, nobody knows anything, paying attention, seeing the news as it happens along with us. We are really excited. We have a big show planned. We have real special guests, people with actual analysis and real things to say, as opposed to the normal bullshit, which is just us, which is exciting. And we're going to be sitting here live basically until we know who has won the Michigan Senate Dem primary. And when Haley Stevens, starts to pull it out, we'll be here at 3 a.m. I will counter that is not true. we do not have the streaming fortitude for that. And so we will be cutting the show when we're tired.
Which is increasingly early.
Which is now. We have some special guests planned for you. We have an amazing all-star panel who's going to be joining the show a little bit later with some fun special guests. But, we are going to try to just see who's around. We're going to be texting people in real time. Going to see who's the most famous person we can get to join this stream. We'll see. Who will it be?
Which of our parents is still awake?
Yeah, my mom very much asleep.
Michigan Senate Watch.
Obviously the story of the night, Jesse, is the Michigan Senate race. There's more. We'll talk about them. You're really the only one tracking them. But it is really, we talked about this a lot on Sunday with Adam Wren. I'm so happy this fucking thing is over. I have to be 100% honest. It is a miserable. It's the worst election ever. And we both worked on 2016.
Yeah, it is very 2016 vibes, just the probably everyone will come together at the end, but maybe not.
but maybe not.
Daniel Strauss.
So here to tell us a little bit more about the worst primary in history is Daniel Strauss, who joins us. Daniel, where are you in the world?
I'm in my library. I'm in my Western Wing library at my Martha's Vineyard house. Oh, wait, that's not me, Rob.
Outed. We got doxed on our
I got
own show.
doxed. I'm going to get swatted. Yes, I am outed. I'm here on Martha's Vineyard.
I don't know. Sorry. Was I not supposed to say that? I mean,
no, that's okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. That was going to be the big reveal at the end when I bring Alan Dershowitz on, fresh from the Chillmark General Store. Pierogi. Okay, can I actually tell you before we start? I was fucking there for Pierogi Gate.
What? Really? My family goes to Martha's Vineyard every once in a while too, so I gotta hear this.
Dude, I was here last summer. I mean, it was only here for 2 days. And I happened to go to the West Tisbury Farmers Market on, like a Wednesday afternoon or whatever. And I had the pierogies. They were fucking amazing. And I was like milling around, and in comes Alan Dershowitz, and Alan Dershowitz goes to the pierogi stand, and this whole fucking thing goes down.
My family was like, maybe we'll see Alan Dershowitz on the island this year. They're the Obamas, and then there are Alan Dershowitz. Those are sort of like the Fabergé eggs of the island.
Of the island.
The gold
100%.
rings on
Gold
the
rings.
carousel that is Martha's Vineyard. That's funny. Rob gets that.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I
don't understand the Martha's
Jesse
Vineyard.
yeah,
because you're a normal person, Jesse.
I'm
because you're a normal person.
I'm just a
listen, growing up,
wee
I was
public
like a
school
Lakers.
kid.
Yeah, exactly. But I am really, this is helping with our astute analysis of the anti-establishment takeover of the Democratic Party that we will
Hey,
see on
Abdul
display
was
tonight.
dancing today, and yesterday he had this influencer party next to a pool. Like,
I did see that.
one's
Yes.
interesting strategy.
Nothing says firing up the working class like a Rhodes Scholar at a pool party. But anyway, moving on. Daniel, we're excited to have you on. You spent some time in Michigan on the ground down the stretch.
I profiled Abdul actually, and it was my second profile of him. My first one was in 2018 when he ran a long shot campaign for governor. And this time around was decidedly different because he's winning this time and he has a chance of winning. So I got to tell you, I mean, he's ripped now. He's not a little softer as he was. And he's more, what I wrote in the piece is that he's definitely more muscular, more ready to get in the ring. And he's been like that through this entire primary. Very much sort of macho back and forths with Mike Rogers if he gets a nomination, a little trash talking there, and very eager to stay relatively on message, but also get confrontational in debates, in press releases and statements and interviews with his opponents, Haley Stevens and Mallory McMorrow.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about, I thought the piece was super interesting because, as you said, you covered him a decade ago almost at this point. And, you said he learned, it seems like he learned a lot from that experience, specific, in addition to the growth that one has naturally over an 8-year stretch or whatever. It seems like he kind of directly learned from that experience. So can you just talk a little bit about what he took away from that loss and from the way Whitmer approached the race and stuff like that?
I mean, look, he said that he very much didn't make it as much about him as he should have, which is, I really think, more campaign speak for he didn't have as sharp and coherent a message. You'll see ads in the closing days of this campaign where he says his favorite taglines: money out of politics, money in your pocket, Medicare for all. And there's an ad of a very big crowd chanting that. There was none of that in 2018. It was very much Abdul for Michigan, not something like Abdul for you. I guess he's now Abdul for Senate. So maybe the official name isn't that different, but he very much sharpened his critique, his stump on the trail. And look, his team, which he's largely kept together, figured that they could produce as many white papers as they could, but that doesn't necessarily translate to votes. Shocking.
So the conventional wisdom going into this evening is that Abdul's going to have a good night. Yeah. And you talked a little bit about, he's eager to get in and take on Mike Rogers. How is he thinking about the rest of the base? How is he thinking about, making amends and the unity stuff? It just doesn't seem like his MO. And, as he builds a coalition for the general, what is his frame?
Well, look, I mean, it is not his MO this time around. There was much more sort of Obama unity come together in 2018 than there is now. And he's very much trying to match the moment in the Democratic Party of very, very much confrontational and enough trying to extend the olive branch. He and his team view their route to unifying the party as twofold. They do know that Abdul is charming. He is charismatic. He can turn that all on. And they all feel that a populist rallying cry to defeat Mike Rogers will ultimately be something that will not only bring former Stevens surrogates to his side, but also activate them in really tangible, energetic ways. And they feel like a populist message in Michigan can break through, much Bernie Sanders has in the past in presidential elections. At the same time, though, he's said a lot of stuff over the years, and Republicans very much feel that there's plenty of receipts and there's plenty of footage that they can use to turn against him. I'll be honest here, I am a little surprised if this night goes as we very much expect. I'm surprised with the the level of the adhesiveness of his voters, they really have not been moved by anything in the race, and that's allowed him to bring on more voters. But there hasn't been much migration if you are an early Abdul supporter to Haley Stevens, to Mallory McMorrow, to Mike Rogers. And what I mean, maybe that'll happen, but as of election night, it doesn't look like that.
Do you expect him to continue to be somewhat confrontational? I mean, like,
Yes.
right? Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like he's gonna, have a
No, but
joint fundraising.
What Democratic voter in 2026 wants their candidates to tone it down, to be nicer to their opponents?
It's a genuinely vexing problem, right? Because we're in a moment where I 100% agree. I think that part of what Haley Stevens' problem has been throughout this campaign is that she's very much seen as of the establishment and, just focused on, I don't want to be involved in the online fights. I'm just going around to, to manufacturing hubs in Michigan or whatever, and I agree with you. It would be sort of run counter to the way he has campaigned to turn around and just be like, arm around Chuck Schumer, and you can disillusion some of your super fans that way. At the same time, it is a swing state, right? We've lost it to Donald Trump multiple times, and Mike Rogers is, I don't think, a super candidate, but he's not a terrible candidate. He's been able to have the base unified behind him on the right, and you're gonna have to bring those. Haley's probably going to get 40% of the vote tonight, 35% of the vote, something like this.
Right.
And you're going to have to bring those people into the tent in order to win in November. So, like, how do you think they balance those equities,
I mean, they're very much hoping that beating Rogers and the low approval rating of the Republican Party is going to extend to Michigan, and that's going to be the rallying cry that's going to bring El-Sayed to his side, and ultimately the energy of these base voters going out and exhibiting a strong ground game, a strong organizing operation, which is what we've seen right now. Now, again, predictions are bad. Reporters are not good oracles. I've been chronically wrong in my predictions. So if I'm Haley Stevens and watching this right now, I'm thinking
which she is. Hello, Haley.
Which she definitely is.
Thank you for spending your election night with us.
Surely. Hi, Congresswoman. But look, they feel that it's not Abdul isn't under any illusion that the circumstances for him being the front runner in this primary are very specific to this midterm cycle. It would not happen in 2018, probably wouldn't happen in 2020, probably wouldn't happen in 2022. And so what they see, his team sees, is that this is the right circumstances for him to actually be elected. Now, Michigan doesn't really elect exciting candidates ever. Not statewide anyway.
How dare you, Debbie Stabenow?
Sorry. Yeah, she's like an action movie. She's, like watching Taylor Sheridan's.
Jennifer Granholm was electric, okay?
You know what? Actually, I will stand for Jennifer Granholm. Low-key a home.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, she's great.
Okay.
Dana,
So-
fuck you.
So
I don't have anything on that.
No, go ahead, Rob.
No, I was going to say, Adam Wren, who is a friend of the show and was on last week, just tweeted out from his day on the trail, Abdul El-Sayed shows me his Whoop recovery store and wanted to make sure that he noted his weightlifting, which has a Whoop score of approximately 10.7, which is, for Whoop users, pretty good. My man's not taking a lot of rest. What is it with him, though, and the showing off of the weightlifting?
Everybody has their coping mechanisms. I don't know what yours are. Mine's an overly
Mine is podcasting.
complicated computer game. Yours is podcasting. Mine's podcasting too. His is very much working out. I mean, part of it is because he's a doctor, so he understands how to do this. He's been a jock for most of his life. And we've talked about this a little bit. He started working on getting in shape. It took him about a year to do that during the pandemic. And it was just his way of getting a little meditation, a little peace, and now it's very much part of his character.
I do think it's
cool
kind
for
of
15 minutes and I'm exhausted.
Same. I do think it's kind of funny that on the one hand you're saying, and I think this is But I think both of these things are true. It's just an interesting contradiction that he recognized that this campaign needed to be about the people of Michigan this time, and and delivering material things for their lives, and at the same time, it does feel like half of his feed and half of their TV ads are like him just doing thirst traps and climbing rock walls and shit. It doesn't feel like super people focused all the time, other than one person.
No, but have you seen some of his ads? Have you seen his launch ad? Another one of his campaign's favorite lines is "It shouldn't be this hard." So yeah, I mean, look, the El-Sayed campaign has had trouble at times calming down some of his more energetic fans, especially when the campaign's turned negative. But they also feel that they can present multiple arguments at once. So, Twitter is not real life, turns out, but their ground game, their door knockers, are more focused on explaining and talking to voters while he's on there rock climbing with his family, which is a thing that happened.
Michael Kruse wrote another profile in the Times, and the sort of theory of it seemed to, he didn't say it explicitly, but it seemed to be that a lot of what drives El-Sayed is actually sort of like a level of insecurity. And I'm curious if you found that in your interactions with him, or if it really is just bravado.
Yeah, Kruse, I worked with Kruse at Politico. He's one of the best magazine writers I've ever seen at all. But no, I've never picked that up. El-Sayed himself will say he has a healthy level of confidence. But he does get introspective at times, and he did feel pretty discouraged after losing in 2018, and I think that that was a little disorienting for him, partially because he usually wins at things that he puts his mind to. I mean, he's been a very good student, a multi-sport athlete, so the impact of a loss in a statewide race by as big a margin as it was did shake him.
Do you have any sense as to what their campaign is looking for tonight? Either counties they're watching, turnout, the kinds of voters they want to see big numbers with. And I assume they're feeling confident. They're certainly projecting confidence, but yeah, I'm just kind of curious, like where
they
want to
see a lot. They want to see a strong turnout of younger voters, which they feel have been one of their base demographics through most of the race. And there's been skepticism that demographic can actually come out and vote. They are going to feel much, much more confident in the general if they see a strong, energetic turnout in places like Ann Arbor and Lansing and college campuses. That's their priority. And they feel that that's a little bit of something that Democrats have been missing for a while, that energy that from when we were young, Jesse, and cool, from the Obama years that have strayed away. Yeah, we were never cool. You're right.
Yeah, I was gonna say we were young.
When was that?
Young.
I love how Rob said that with just a look and kept doing whatever he was doing. But yeah, so that's what they're looking for right now. They if you want to make them sweat, the turnout among Black constituencies in Detroit going way up among older and Black voters, that would really make them nervous, because that is arguably the one through line that Stevens seems to have to pulling this off. But it would be a very big upset. But hey, polls can be wrong.
Yeah, no, I was just pulling up this Emerson poll, and I mean, it really is kind of astonishing, the splits where Abdul El-Sayed basically winning by 40 plus points among people under 40 under 49 or under 50.
No, a double digit. Can I just say a double digit win in a state like this is pretty unheard of. We're just not in an era where candidates win that decisively anywhere ever in contested races. I would be less surprised if he won by single digits, which at one point in time was a close race, but like you could see it by 5 or 7. But, and it's also conceivable that there is, again, I'm sorry, I'm just talking in circles here. It's conceivable that there's some sort of silent majority for Stevens, I guess. I don't know. They really like the stick it to him.
But talk about that. Haley Stevens wins tonight. What happened? And what did people miss? It would be, sort of underrepresented polling.
If Stevens were to win tonight, it would be that polling missed reliable voters who don't necessarily participate in surveys and voters who were not sold that El-Sayed ultimately could win in a general election. That is the most compelling argument among Democrats that toward Stevens' candidacy. Stevens herself has said she is a workhorse. She is not a show horse. And so the argument here is that Democrats would be more confident if Stevens won. They would feel that a candidate who keeps a lower profile is less of a liability behind a microphone with a higher ceiling but a lower floor is more likely to win the Senate seat and beat Rogers.
Yeah. It has always been my case in this race that I feel like Abdul has real general election liabilities, and there are real challenges for him. I've also found that there are real liability. I mean, I would find it difficult to imagine a world where Haley Stevens is where she makes up the voters that she is going to lose with young voters if would have lost in that scenario to be able to win. If she's able to win despite everything, which is possible, it does not seem particularly likely. But, it just feels to me like these were two candidates that, both had some issues as we pivoted towards the general election.
She's less sure of herself in front of a microphone, and part of that is because El-Sayed is very confident, but she's a little more skittish in front on a debate stage. And she is, you're right. Both of these candidates are prone to saying things that they would regret later on, and that can be used against them. At the same time, though, Rob, this is the era of raw authenticity. Voters do not like a candidate who is way too scripted. They find it relatable when a candidate stands by, things they've said in the past or don't apologize. And that used to be just Republicans. Now that's sort of Democrats also.
It did seem like the moment that she kind of hit her stride a little bit was after she embraced the stick it to him quote that went viral and just kind of owning it. I'm not a smooth talking podcaster, like whatever. This is how I talk. This is how Michigan talks. So the last question for you, and then we'll bring you back later in the evening. But from your time on the ground there, like how big of an issue and a voting issue do you think that the AIPAC and broader Israel thing is? Obviously, Haley Stevens.
It is a huge motivating factor for Democrats supporting El-Sayed or leaning that way. And I'll tell you why. It is not necessarily because of the issue itself. It is the strong skepticism among Democrats and the strong exhaustion that the sense that there are establishment forces, there are outside secretive forces tilting the scales away from voters in any primary election. That is that's the larger impact of AIPAC's spending in that race. El-Sayed and his people feel that the more that AIPAC spent for Haley, the more they benefited because they had a bigger boogeyman to use to rally voters and say, we're the little guy, we're like you, we're fighting these big corporate interests. And frankly, look, if Stevens was a better fundraiser for most of this race, she would probably be able to make a stronger argument that she didn't need that money, and that argument that El-Sayed is making isn't quite as compelling as he would like it to be.
Right on. Well, Daniel Strauss, thank you for debasing yourself, joining Nobody Knows Anything. And we will talk to you. We will talk to you later this evening.
Catch you later, fellas.
Bye. Talk to you soon.
All right, Jesse, listen, I just feel the two of us, we needed to call in some reinforcements. We needed to call in some interesting people.
Lauren Hitt and Caitlin Legacki.
Some very smart folks who know a lot about a lot of stuff. So I want to introduce our all-star panel. We have Lauren Hitt and Caitlin Legacki.
Oh my God. Look at that blazer.
Oh my God.
Woo.
I had to get dressed up for you guys. Are you kidding me?
We really appreciate it.
I did not dress up. I may or may not be wearing pajama bottoms, but I am very excited to be here.
The due level of respect. Lauren Hitt, former communications director for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, an upstart congresswoman from New York. And Caitlin Legacki, formerly of the Stevens campaign, currently of a number of clients, including a little upstart company called Palantir. Yeah, welcome to the show. Caitlin, if we make too many Palantir jokes tonight. What is more likely, that they drone me or that they rifle through my emails?
I mean, here's the thing, and here's how we all know that what you're saying about them is not true, is that if you actually believed that, you wouldn't be so mean to me.
That's right. Caitlin Legacki's drone force has been sitting off in the background.
That's what she gets paid the
That's
big
right.
bucks for, folks.
That was some persuasive spin.
Yeah, really, really got us going.
Be a lot nicer to me, okay?
Yeah, a lesson learned. How are we feeling going into this night? Looking at the atmospherics, what do you think is going to happen? How are we sort of feeling? I'll start with you, Lauren Hitt, if you had to assess the situation.
I think people are pretty confident about an El-Sayed victory. I think the left is really excited. Like, a big statewide victory is new territory, and it comes off a summer of a lot of momentum. So I think people are feeling pretty excited, pretty optimistic about where he goes from here. Feel like it's part of this larger pattern of folks winning in unexpected places and with unexpected electorate. So I think it's been a pretty good summer for the left, and I think folks are feeling like this is the capstone on a lot of other victories.
Caitlin, if obviously you come from a more moderate side of the equation, having worked for Stevens, you're looking out on this night. How are you feeling? How would you assess the state of the race?
First of all, I want to say that I loved getting to know Haley Stevens and her team. I think that what Daniel was saying is true. There is no artifice. She wants nothing more than to go to the U.S. Senate and represent Michigan and be like Michigan's biggest cheerleader. And I think that is a very good thing, inarguably a good thing. I think that, the polls are tough. Nobody wants to have, the polling average that she has right now. I think it remains to be seen whether or not there is a silent majority, whether or not there are a number of older Detroit voters that show up for her in a way that, the campaign was really banking on them showing up. But we'll see what happens.
When you guys, when you're sort of in the Haley camp, the theory of the case obviously was a more electable general election candidate. Abdul El-Sayed has his sort of challenges. What do you make of Abdul as he potentially pivots towards a general? What are his, strengths? What might his weaknesses be?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is that for a long time, Abdul, like every conversation I had with a reporter was like, Abdul is the only one that can't win. And, we were like, that's not actually the case. Like, in focus groups going back to January, December, like, voters liked him. He has the natural charisma and magic that I think a really good candidate needs. I think the question going forward is, one, does he try to get folks to bend the knee the way that Graham Plattner kind of did? Does he actually pivot to the general and try to unite the party, or does he try to kind of make the establishment bend the knee to him? I think that remains to be seen. But then also, I think, he had a bit of a glass jaw with some of the attacks from like Stevens and her allies. And I think he has no idea what's coming from Republicans. And so we'll see, how he responds to that, whether he's able to keep his cool when they start making really, really ugly attacks, as I think we all expect they will. But I do hope that whoever is the nominee, we have to win this seat. We have to hold this seat. And that's what matters the most.
I think that is, I think that ties into a question I want to ask you, Lauren, which is, by the way, Caitlin, I don't know if you put head of sales in there, but that was not intentional. Amazing. If so, I have to be honest.
Early Michigan results.
I think we'll get back to the Michigan Senate race because as these first votes come in, it would seem to indicate that it's going to be a blowout win for Abdul. I'm just vastly overreading the first votes to come in here, but Kalshi now saying 82% chance that it's over a 15% victory, over wins by more than 15.
We are starting to get some results in the Michigan Senate primary. The New York Times reporting with 3% in, it is El-Sayed at 62% and Stevens at 34%, but a whole lot outstanding as we get through the count. So, not much you can read into this at this point, unless,
It does feel like, just based on the way these early votes are coming in, I mean, it could be a rough night for, our centrist heroes.
That's right. We are heroes.
Heroes.
No,
What I will say, and I think what's hard about this is that we expect Detroit to come in later in the evening. So, the trend lines are what they are, but I think the hardest part for Haley and her supporters is that their reinforcements are not going to show up until much later in the evening. So it's possible that there's just this narrative wave, and it's going to be hard to hold the tide and say, let's wait and see till, what happens in Detroit. Miracles are possible, but I do think when you're looking at how the results are going to come in, that's an important thing to keep in mind.
So this basic take from the Stevens camp is if it's going to happen, it's going to happen later.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you going to claim that there was, foul play when you see what was happening? There was a blue shift. There was a late night blue
That's
shift.
Right. That's right. Jesse and Rob rigged it once again.
Dude, if we could rig elections, we would not be podcasters.
At what point in the night are you calling your boys, the Pallant Bros, and saying, can we just, put a little fairy dust on a couple of these old machines,
Every client owns and controls their own data, Rob.
Man, you are a machine.
Oh my God. Yeah, so it does seem like if you're looking at the story tonight, it really is. This is a lot of progressive.
Yeah.
There's a real possibility that this is maybe the most important night for progressives in a very long time. When you look at all of these races, there seem to be some connective tissue between, how progressives are feeling in all of these races. Lauren, if we go through this night and there's this big sweep, I mean, what is the takeaway for a lot of folks on the far left?
Yeah, I mean, I think November honestly is the most important night, because that's when we'll prove the theory of the case, right? Like, I think a lot of the headlines tomorrow, if things go the way we expect, will be like, progressives won, but centrist establishment worry if they can actually do the thing, if they can actually win in November. And then that'll sort of be the narrative that arcs through a lot of these races between now and election night. So yeah, like that is the defining moment. I think it's exciting. I think the good news for progressives already is that we used to do real battles just in primaries about this electability question. And I think it is clear that the electorate has really, the Democratic primary electorate has really shifted on that in a pretty meaningful way. They are expanding their vision on what an electable candidate looks like. And so that is good news. If the progressive left no longer has to walk around carrying that burden of battling these concerns about electability, then a lot more places are open to us all of a sudden. But to hold fast to that, we then also have to win in November. So, look, I mean, say what you will about DSA, but they are hard workers. And I think that El-Sayed has had an insane volunteer operation, and I kind of remember rolling my eyes last year during the New York City primary when I would talk to Zoran's folks and they'd be like, well, we're not running any negative ads on Cuomo, but we have an insane volunteer operation. And I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, please run the ads. Do both. You have millions of dollars. Like, you fought so hard for this publicly financed campaign system. Use it. But I was wrong. They marched all over the city and they had this incredible turnout and cured the male loneliness epidemic on top of it. It was really impressive. And I think we're seeing that again play out in Michigan. I think they're every bit capable of doing it, but I do think that tomorrow is where the real work begins, and they're going to have to knock a lot of doors and talk to people who don't always agree with them, and really going to have to make a economic populist forward case for their candidate.
Can I just, before we pivot, I do think Lauren said one thing that's really important, is that like the key to solving this electability question is, can they win in November? And I think up until now, the DSA and like-minded allies have never flipped a seat from red to blue. And if there's going to be a year where this happens, I think this is the year that it happens. But I do think we have, as a party, as much as we may disagree on a lot, we have to keep the main thing. And that if we are not winning elections in November, none of this matters.
Well, we have our first extra special guest entering the chat, coming to us live.
Liam Donovan.
We've got Liam Donovan, a Republican strategist and friend of the show. Welcome aboard, Liam.
Good to be here.
Welcome to the commie powwow.
Yeah, exactly. We'll redistribute your wealth right at the door. And you have to, whatever. First, before we start, what do you think of Thanksgiving?
Oh, Jesus.
I think we just need to let her cook. She's onto something here, and I think is really doing a great job of keeping that issue alive without satisfying anybody. She's one of my favorite answers of the cycle.
Oh Lord, Liam, tell us about the Republican side of this. You're watching a Democratic primary that you've made the case on this show and on others and on Twitter that you're watching 2010 happen to us. Tell us a little bit about how Republicans are feeling watching the Michigan Senate primary and what seems to be likely to be an El-Sayed win tonight, though, of course, it's too early to say.
It is an eerie phenomenon because I've been waiting for this for some time because the parallels have been there. They just haven't been quite synced up in the same way. And it really is. This is the first time we're sort of seeing the grasp of the establishment start to slip. I mean, I was thinking to myself, this is 20 years almost, to the moment of Schumer's, the best job he ever had was as DSCC chair, as the architect of the majority in 2006. And to see that finally fail him. And it's interesting because he actually has gotten some good recruits in some places, but watching it in Maine, they sort of maybe righted the ship there. Seeing it in Michigan, it just seems to be happening all over the map. And, I think the unfamiliar part of this from a Republican standpoint is Mike Rogers has just been able to float around there, bank money, and not have to answer for anything and watch, the fun of watching the other side fight for a change. It's something we've seen so many times. I've seen it, and I feel like in Arizona, every cycle, that's the way it is with these late primaries. And so, like it was just said, I think having a 100-day sprint where it's a unity exercise where Democrats have to come together and have to, as Caitlin was saying, do something they've never done before, which is rather than score kind of intramural points, actually do the rare thing and kind of run to the middle and vanquish a Republican opponent, which is in a lot of ways less fun. And you saw it with the early Plattner general election, right? That pivot is tough. And I think Abdul El-Sayed seems to be a talented politician. So to watch how he pivots and whether he's willing to do the sorts of things you need to do to mend fences, I think that's the interesting thing to watch. But it is a tough challenge in this home stretch.
How much, across the Republican Party, it seemed like there's been some Republican money maybe propping up Francesca Hung in the Wisconsin governor's race. We were alluding to her earlier. Similarly, a mystery PAC swooped into that Michigan 7th race that we were talking about, seemingly going after Matt Mosdem and propping up Will Lawrence. Do you think it's like across the board, the Republican Party feels like it is a home run for them to run? Again, this theory hasn't quite been tested in like swing states and districts, but do people feel like it's a home run to run against, sort of DSA aligned candidates?
I think if you're trying to craft a narrative whereby Republicans writ large can find a way to win in a cycle where the environment seems to be tailing away from them, this is what you have to run on. And the more you can point to this pattern, then you can even get some instances where somebody's not necessarily DSA or not even thought of that way. But if you can turn this into a nationalized election at a time when the national climate isn't that great, but if you can turn this into, we can't put these people in power because it's not ideal, but if the race is going to be nationalized, you need to bring some symmetry to that distaste that occurs, on the national party. And if you're looking at the polls, as unpopular as Donald Trump is at this moment, the Democratic Party is very unpopular. I think that's a complicated statistic because some people don't like him because they're not far left enough. But I think to the extent that you can pour salt in those wounds, I think that is something at the margins that can only help if you're a Republican.
How we last talked a couple of months ago, Liam, about the state of everything. Like, How have your views on the midterm updated? How are Republicans' views on the midterm updated? I've seen some almost more bullish seeming, talk out of the Republican camp. How much of that do you feel like is cope? Do you still like the fundamentals are the same? How have the last couple of months changed your view?
Look, I don't think much has changed except insofar as the time for things to change has abbreviated. I mean, I think last time we talked, it was more like 200 days away, and all of a sudden you cut that in half. And I think, that can be for good or for ill. If you are the party that's down and out, then the best thing you can point to is, well, there's still time for things to get better. And I think I think last time we talked was sort of heading into the summer, and there was a question of what are we going to be thinking about? What are we talking about? Now I'm thinking more about school starting back up again. We're getting into that fall season. I think that's when the voter mentality shifts and we start paying attention to elections. I don't think things have fundamentally changed. And I would have hoped last time we talked that by this point we would have put to bed some of the things that do keep Republicans up at night. So, I think it's steady as she goes in a way that's not necessarily great, but the numbers haven't fallen off a cliff. And so I think there's still time for Republicans to kind of put the jerseys on. Trump approval needs to get above 38. You got to be up in the low 40s at the very least. And so that's what I'd be hoping for if I'm a Republican, campaign manager. I think what we haven't seen yet will be very interesting to watch is how much it matters the national resources that Republicans have and the newfound ability to coordinate with the campaigns and deploy and allocate those resources in the most efficient way, that in a way we haven't had the opportunity to do thanks to the Supreme Court decision. The other X factor is what the heck is the Trump team and James Blair going to do with that, 3, 4, whatever $100 million they're sitting on. I think a lot of that is going to have to be soaked up by Texas, but I mean, it's a lot of coin. And, it's not a symmetrical situation given how the national parties are looking on the Democratic side. Of course, the Act Blue, smashing that button, I think is going to be popular pastime for Democrats heading into the fall. So, it might even out.
What is we've talked a lot on the show about the spending gaps, and can Republicans spend their way to this being closer to a draw? I've been very interested in watching the AIPAC spending in the Michigan primary, insofar as it's almost been counterproductive. I mean, I would go so far as to say it has been counterproductive. The spending actually became a problem. El-Sayed was able to it seems like able to overcome it, although of course the night is long. What does that say to you about the impact of this spending? And also, it's clear that AIPAC is not going to be done in the Democratic primary. They are going to come back for more. And so what delta can they make up? Can MAGA Inc. make up? Obviously they're spending less of a brand name in the same way, but still, I think, curious for your thoughts.
Yeah, I think the challenge there is AIPAC became the story in a meta way that's unhelpful. And so if it's just, a fungible resource that's being deployed against messaging that's actually helpful in a primary or general situation, like that's to the good. But the minute your, whatever marginal upside your spending has benefits the other side in terms of galvanizing the opposition, in terms of helping them raise money, I think that ends up sort of, backfiring in some ways. But at the same time, on the one hand, you don't want to make the story about your PAC. On the other hand, the reason that you marshal these resources behind a single issue is to make people scared of you. And so you kind of have to, the beatings will continue until morale improves. I think the more interesting thing to me, just zooming out to what are these single issue PACs or maybe special purpose vehicles going to do? I think, the crypto PACs and whatnot, like the Sherrod Brown candidacy in Ohio, that can be a really tough race for Republicans, but it's also one where they kind of got him once. And I think that's going to be the one that I think there are individual races that will become hobby horses for one PAC or another. And if you can have a division of labor like that, I think that can have a big impact, particularly at the Senate level.
Just a quick update from Ellis Bates. There's an early drop from Saginaw, which Clinton ultimately won by 12 points over Sanders in 2016, showing him dominating. He also highlighted, I thought it was pretty funny, Ann Arbor came in with 45 votes, 100% for Abdul El-Sayed, which is surprising to probably nobody in this chat. Lauren, I'm curious. We talked a little bit about how progressives are going to try to line up against Republicans. And there's been this sort of meme on the internet, so to speak, but a narrative that progressives are more interested in defeating Democrats than defeating Republicans, how do you think a DSA aligned or progressive candidate like El-Sayed is going to kind of approach a Mike Rogers or a Republican in their arguments? And how's that going to differ from what a more moderate candidate might do if they were to make it through?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty BS that the left is more interested in beating the center than they are in beating the right. I think sometimes the center can be particularly annoying. And so we can get a little fiery on Twitter about it. And so fair enough. But no,
Caitlin, would you agree the center is annoying?
I don't know what Lauren's talking about.
Yeah, it was not a subtweet, Caitlin. So,
no, I appreciate you tagging me.
No, I mean, look, often the left fields candidates that have felt the impact of the Trump administration very personally, right? These are often folks from working class backgrounds who really have seen the ways in which the Trump administration can be like make or break it, life or death for their families, for their communities. So they take it really fucking seriously. This is not a game. We're not just trying to score points. We are absolutely trying to win, and we are trying to deliver. And I honestly think most of the folks I've met on the left take this far more seriously and are like far more invested in the policy outcome than sort of some of the gamesmanship and, sort of treating it a little bit more like it's just a job and just sort of a game to be played than I have sometimes seen sort of in the more establishment professional spaces. So I'd push back quite hard on that. In terms of how they, approach the Mike Rogers, I think a lot of El-Sayed's primary election message will carry over. I think money in your pockets, money out of politics is very popular. It's a very good general election message. And I think that particularly if AIPAC comes in for Rogers, the way that people expect, it could be very, very effective. So I think focusing on the economy of tagging the blame with Trump and also sort of the corporations and sort of wealthy people he surrounds himself with and gives tax breaks to so they don't have to pay too much for their private jets will be a pretty effective message.
Yeah, I have actually made the argument that I think as Rob said, I think both Abdul El-Sayed and Haley Stevens would have had certain liabilities, certain strengths, but I do think there is value in having someone that can make an incredibly clear contrast and against a candidate like Mike Rogers, who is sort of, avert your ears, Liam, but a little bit of a corrupt, establishment Republican who been living in Florida for a while and not a lot of distance with Trump. I do think that having someone who can credibly run that sort of anti-establishment outsider, I'm for you kind of campaign, it is easier to make the strongest attacks on Rogers, I think, if you're Abdul El-Sayed, as opposed to Haley Stevens. Again, not to say that he's better or worse overall as a general election candidate, in the abstract, but I think it's a bit of an easier race to run.
I gotta say though, one thing that really surprised us in focus groups and polling was how much, even from very liberal Democratic voters, we heard, I don't just want somebody who's gonna shout and yell all day. I want somebody who's has a track record of getting things done. And so, as the left is looking at where it goes from here, I think we knew that one of Haley's greatest strengths would be her ranking as the most effective congressional member of Congress from Michigan. But, you do still hear from a lot of voters, a lot of reliable Democratic voters, that they don't just want to elect people to go to DC to fight. They want people to go who are going to fight and get stuff done. And I think that's where the rubber really meets the road. And we're going to see kind of what some of these candidates are made of.
I'm actually not surprised by that focus group finding at all. And I actually think it's really telling, because I think what has happened is kind of this interesting reversal where all of a sudden people are looking at more establishment politicians with a lot of skepticism because they feel like they've been giving a lot of lip service to issues, but not actually ever getting anything done. And now you're seeing some leftists, including Zoran, who's been really successful in New York City so far and actually delivering on things, getting things done, willing to charge at things a little differently, come in with fresh ideas, offer real specifics. So I'm actually not surprised at all by that group. And I think part of the reason for this like shift, this like change in how the electorate thinks about the electability of the left is due in part because they feel like the center stopped delivering.
Yeah, and on that point, though, I was just going to say that Milot Kiros election in Denver was a really good case study in that, where she was basically like, yeah, Diana DeGette has the right positions on a bunch of issues, but she's also been in D.C. for 30 years, and we haven't gotten any of the things that she's for. So what are we getting out of this? So I just thought that was interesting. Rob, go ahead.
We have a quick update. The Amendment 4, which we discussed in Jesse's magic bag of questions, or ballot referenda, has failed. So we're going to be getting more libbed out ballot referenda in Missouri, if not libs in Missouri. I am curious, Liam, you're hearing this back and forth between Caitlin and Lauren about what's going on in focus groups and, people who want to deliver and feel like you failed on the delivery and like, who cares? And is this kind of the same thing? Or is this what people were seeing in 2010 in the Tea Party? Is this
much kinder and gentler, I'd say. I think we're all friends here. So, but I mean, it's certainly a version of it. I mean, I think that the sort of tactical and strategic dynamics and really fundamentally, this is really about, and I was thinking about this earlier in terms of the trajectory of trust in the establishment, which and this notion that you guys were talking about of electability. What does that mean? There's it's a pejorative in some ways. To the left, they hear electable as squishy and useless and weak, and that's certainly that's how the ear on the right among the rank and file heard it for so many years. But the outrage of the Obama era sort of papered over those things, and the victories and the ability to sort of co-opt those dynamics convinced the establishment, oh no, we figured this out, we can kind of ride this tiger. And I think that's in both cases when the establishment got its comeuppance. I think in the case of Republicans, it was 2012, and it certainly got it again in 2015, 2016. But Obama's victory was when it exposed the weakness of the party and its idea of what electable means. And Democrats saw this in 2024. And so in some ways, it's just a delayed reckoning in the exact same way. And so, but this is the proof point, right? This is when you get to test who is right, with real live ammo. And I think the interesting thing to me about all these things is I do not doubt El-Sayed or any of the others' abilities to win an election in an environment like 2026 stands to be. To me, the interesting thing as a Republican is if I can think of what a bad night would look like and what the downstream effects would be, it might be that it convinces and sort of validates this mindset of the left and of the insurgency that actually we don't have to listen to any of those concerns. We don't have to think about electability. That's all just some sort of, mushy neo-lib spin. And we can just let our freak flag fly. And that's the kind of thing that I think, it's a very interesting cross current of the sort of ghosts of 2020, which we talked about this last time on the show. I think the experience of the questionnaires from the groups, the hands up on the stage, and then coming back to haunt people. But at the same time, you're going to have this kind of left side of the dais, not inhabited by Bernie, not inhabited by Warren. Who's going to seize that sort of lane, if you will? And I think the outcome of 2026, the better it goes, the more there's going to be a tendency to just say, why would we get sort of diet progressive when we can just go full bore? Because, Donald Trump is really unpopular. JD Vance is a weirdo. And I think there's ways that you can rationalize making really foolish political choices that are made easier to rationalize the better that you do in 2026.
Yeah.
Well, Liam, thank you for joining our all-star panel this evening, sharing more of your far-right MAGA extremist wisdom with the chat.
That's me.
We will talk more soon. Thanks, Liam.
See you guys.
We have a little bit of breaking news because we are going back to Jesse's grab bag ballot referenda. The no wins the Kansas constitutional amendment, which is
good.
good news.
We like that.
Okay. Thank you for telling us whether that's good or bad, because
which is good.
I was paying attention, Jesse. I read the tweet twice, actually.
These know-it-all liberals are constantly just trying to throw us under the bus.
And I'll have you know, the DSA is going to flip the Ann Arbor mayoral.
Wow.
So I didn't put it in the brief for you guys. But
consider the electability question settled.
Yeah, exactly. As Ann Arbor goes, so goes the nation.
So goes the nation. We do have some results coming in from Detroit. Early vote. Haley Stevens winning by just about 4. That's not the number she's going to want to see there, certainly. So, starting to trend in the direction of a pretty big El-Sayed win, though it is early. These are definitely tight numbers.
One other big, surprising to me, breaking update here. Wesley Bell has officially defeated Cori Bush in the rematch in Michigan's 1st district. The NBC News calling that. So, it's legit.
Wow.
I'm surprised.
Yeah.
That is pretty shocking. Yep. The AP calling it as well via, Phil Lewis, Detroit native, who always gets those wire tweets out pretty fast, which is pretty surprising. That cuts against my expectations. Caitlin, doesn't cut against yours. Why is that?
St. Louis is a weird place. I love it. But there has always been this kind of weird marriage of pro-business, I think kind of establishment Dem, I think you would see, they're liberal, but people there, I think, want stability. And the issue that Cori Bush had, and the reason she lost a couple years ago, was that people there viewed her as caring more about a national profile, national issues, than just delivering results for St. Louis. And it's a pretty parochial kind of city where they still very, very much care about local issues. They want to make sure that you're getting, federal funding for all of your, various projects. And I think there was a real concern that she was not focused enough on local issues that I don't know that she really resolved in this campaign. And I think Wesley Bell has done a good job. He's been pretty solid. He's been reliable. People know what they're going to get with him. And I think it was very much a situation where they're like, if it's not broke, we're not going to fix it.
Lauren, what do you make of that? Noteworthy, though, again, you do not speak for AOC. Noteworthy, as we discussed, AOC did not endorse in this race. What did she know, and when did she know it?
Oh, man, I won't attempt to speak for that. No, I mean, look, I'm bummed. I really love Congresswoman Bush. I think she's great. But look, I do think this is, the old expression, all politics is local, is very real. People do need to feel you're focused on them. It was my experience that the Congresswoman very much was, but there's perception and then there's reality. So, look, and as we talk about sort of lessons for the fall, Republicans will do everything they can to make it look like the left is not focused on you, right? This is the famous closing Kamala ad, right? They're from the Trump campaign. She's for they, them, not you. Or not us. And, I think people think that was powerful because it hit on some anti-trans sentiment, but really it was powerful because I think it spoke to this feeling that Democrats just weren't focused on the issues that mattered to most people. And Republicans are going to try very, very hard to make it, to make Democrats, and particularly Democrats on the left, look like they aren't concerned about everyday kitchen table issues, that they're out of touch with those, that they're elitist academic leftists that are more concerned about divisive social issues, and they're generally not. And it's just sort of our job, which I think the progressives and the left have done an increasingly good job of doing, of lasering in on the economic policies that we do support, because I think overwhelmingly those are pretty persuasive.
Yeah, Daniel Strauss wrote about it a little bit in this piece about what Abdul learned, and he talked about, about the Gretchen Whitmer slogan in 2018 being "fix the damn roads," and it does feel like Abdul did a better job. He talked about more money in your pocket, money out of politics, Medicare for all, and just did a better job of tying the, progressive economic vision this time, directly to things that people can feel in their pockets. And I think one other point on the Cori Bush race, I think that it is harder to run that kind of insurgent big ideas campaign as someone who has already had the job, than it is when you're like, throw the bums out. I'm going to come in and do the job. And it's really hard. I mean, the reality is one congresswoman cannot make policy, but it just, I think it's probably harder to run that kind of campaign having already had the job, so it'll be interesting to see whether there's other places where the sort of more establishment candidates are successful in beating that back, or whether these kind of unique dynamics and the $9 million that AIPAC spent last cycle, some of those things I think had lasting impact, where people have, just been exposed to an insane amount of anti-Cori Bush advertising in relatively recent history.
We've got a question from the chat from Dave Anderson 776. He hangs with some Methodists outside of Kansas, and they love Adam Hamilton. He's a national rep in the church, and he's got a big following in Kansas. Can he be competitive in a general?
I think he can. I think people are underestimating, and it was funny as Liam was talking about papering over, things because you had a good midterm or whatever. It is one of my big fears is that we're going to have a really, really good 2026 midterm night, which obviously I would like to see that outcome, but that it's going to paper over the fact that we haven't really fixed the rot that underlies this, Democratic brand of being brutal still. But I really do think this is going to be a grand slam of a midterms for Democrats. I think people are underappreciating just how bad Trump's approval is just so low. And in a lot of these states, not just in swing states, but Kansas, Iowa, Alaska, Ohio, all these states where there are these key races, I think he's underwater in even states that he carried by 13, 15 points,
Yes, but I do think candidates still matter. And so I think that if Adam Hamilton runs a Laura Kelly style campaign that is very focused on Kansas, he does not try to nationalize this race. He finds a couple places where he can disown, frankly, national Democrats and create distance, then he's got a shot. It's uphill for sure. But when you look at Kansas Democrats like Laura Kelly and Sharice David, there is a roadmap there. I do think that as bad as Trump's numbers are, though, like when you look at the scenarios in Michigan and Maine, we cannot get complacent. And I frankly lose a lot of sleep about this because I do think that a lot of Democrats think we're going to have a nominee and the Senate map is so much better than, we ever thought it would be. But there's a real scenario where you have a 4-seat House majority and it's going to be tough. And so I'm always a little bit of an election doomer, and I always think we're going to lose worse than we should. But when you look at the polling in Michigan and Maine right now, it's just it's not where we all think it should be in terms of Trump's favorability and unfavorability. And I think we have to be very careful about taking these seats for granted.
I mean, I really agree with what you said about candidates mattering. And it actually does give me a little bit of hope for the presidential cycle. I think, our entire primary is going to be a year-long navel gazing exercise and like why we suck so much and who has the best answer to why we suck and how we can be better. That's it. It's going to be awful. But I do think that's all it will be. And out of that will emerge someone with a pretty compelling answer. It's hard to see it really being about anything else. And if I think if you have somebody who actually has answered that question well and managed to unite a broad enough group of Democrats around that idea, then I think, while it's far from guaranteed, and I agree that it would be a mistake to consider it some sort of cakewalk based on how these midterms go, I think we could have a real shot at not just winning, but doing a badly needed brand reset. The autopsy we never got, where we all sort of like admitted that we did wrong and we can do better. I think the cleansing might finally come next year.
I love your optimism.
There's this expression that like sometimes hope is just a strategic choice. And I find myself saying that to myself a lot.
That was Obama's slogan. Hope. It's just a strategic choice.
But wasn't Pelosi hope is not a strategy?
That's true.
It's not our only disagreement,
That's true. I had to do, when I was an intern for the Democratic National Committee, I had to do a college Democrats video.
Oh God.
And I had to ask, why are you a Democrat? And college Democrats are the most insufferable people in the, sorry if any of you are listening.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Dude,
They're the only people listening to this.
It might,
terrible.
the left
I
and
know,
center. We might all agree.
the numbers are going down. Terrible people. But the first person, I said, why are you a Democrat? And the first guy goes, because hope is the stuff of dreams, and dreams are what change are made of. And I'm like, oh my God. Anyway, that guy's Jesse Larick. And we have a special guest, Jack Koch, joining the chat.
Abdul Victory Party.
What's the vibe at El-Sayed HQ?
Every time that Abdul's back up on the screen, there's a crowd. People are excited. The numbers keep coming in. The numbers keep looking better. I could give you the talking points version where I'm like very much on it, or I could just give you a quick look at the crowd. But everyone's excited. There is a ton of press here. It's mostly to cover me and Hassan, people have been saying. That's a joke.
Not sure.
But
Were you at the pool party yesterday? Did you get the invite to the pool party?
I received one. I was working though, because some of us in podcasting work every day. Okay.
But also with that complexion, you can't spend too much time in the sun.
Oh.
Wow. Okay. Well, I came on this live stream as a favor, and it's already gotten thrown in my face. So to go back to my talking points, I want to quickly say again, there is so much media here because I think people understand the significance of what this night means in terms of the conversation that's going to happen about who can win Michigan in 2028, who should be our nominee. You know, a lot of people talked about this state as an investment for the people who are backing Haley Stevens. And my campaign is an investment in the progressive movement's ability to show, hey, we can deliver. That's my side. Sorry, Rob. I'm sorry.
Well, Jack, we are incredibly grateful to have you from
Am
the
I
ground.
getting kicked so soon?
Well, no, I don't want to. Please, I don't want to.
I might be on the same shitty internet that Jack is.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You're coming through a little better.
Yeah, you're coming through great. Jack, you know, the results, and by the way, Kenneth Pennington has joined us from Middle Seat Strategies, an advisor to the El-Sayed campaign as well. So, you know, the first drops are looking pretty good for El-Sayed. Is the energy on the campaign side as good as it's feeling in the room, Kenneth?
I think you nailed it.
Yeah.
No, it's hard not to feel good. You feel like you've overcome so much. And so I think that's a big part of it too. But yeah, the vibes are good on the ground.
I love that. Jack, if you are advising Abdul El-Sayed on what should tomorrow look like for him, what's his strategy from here? What should it be?
He should probably make sure he can stay in the gym. So the T-shirts are fitting as tight as they have been on the campaign trail. Someone was asking me about the appeal to young men. I'm like, well, we want things to not be unaffordable, but also tight T-shirts. That's pretty cool. But it's the same thing. It's money out of politics, money in your pocket, Medicare for all. I don't think a lot changes in the general. I love how much he hates Mike Rogers. I think we need some more hate in our heart in the Democratic Party. After the Lindsey Graham, a lot of respect and love episode of a few weeks ago, I'm ready for some hate, which is maybe a bad sign for my soul. I think that's what it is. Meet them with the anger that other people feel, and they should. We're in a legal war. The president has dementia, and Mitch McConnell's not alive. I don't know if I'm ruining the credibility of this show, but no, be angry.
Yeah. This is the most credible we've been. No, yeah, that's right.
That's my advice, but I'm not a professional.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, you know, we'll see. I mean, Kenneth, how you know, obviously the night is young, but if you know what is going through the head of the El-Sayed campaign on the actual campaign side?
I think people are really excited to start the general election. I think people are excited to unite the Big Tent. Kaylin is welcome as well. It's going to be great. Everybody's welcome. The water's warm.
Everyone's welcome.
And I think to what Jack pointed out too is, you know, people have forgotten a little bit about who Mike Rogers is throughout this process. And so I think people are raring to remind people of his record too. So I think people are excited for that portion of it. And,
I got to jump in real quick.
In the tight T-shirts.
Yeah, go for it.
Victory has 1,000 fathers. We all know that. But Abdul's comms director, Roxy Richner, is a star.
Yes.
Learn the name now. Know the name now. She's fantastic. I got to know her a little bit over the course of the primary. Someday we will all be working for her in socialist salt mines. But I'm such a fan. I'm such a fan.
Yeah. Jack, can you commit right now to making sure that moderate Democrats get comfortable confines in the socialist pogroms?
What do you think of that? Well, in the work camps, we have a nice suite set up for you because you just have such a lovely smile and way about yourself. Yeah, everyone is welcome. I think Abdul has been very clear about how big the tent is. I think Mayor Mamdani has been clear about how big the tent is. Everyone's welcome. We have an overflow room at this event. Everyone is so welcome.
Jack, talk to me a little bit about that, the unity side of this, because it's this interesting place, right? Where
can I give a little news that you should expect later?
Yes.
There's going to be some unity very soon that you're going to be very excited to see on the previous question. That's all I can say.
Wow.
Is it the unity that was previewed in Playbook this morning?
Yeah, I think the cat's out of the bag on that one.
I actually don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. So,
I think Big Murrow is
tweeted.
going to stand on stage and
Perhaps.
Yeah.
I see. Wow,
Which
that's good for
I think
her.
that's great.
I don't do scoops. I do
You
commentary.
Old Jackie Scoops, they call him. Old Jackie Scoops.
All right, and on that note, I'm going to
Yeah.
leave before I get fired.
Okay, Jack, thank you for joining us from the room. We
From the room.
See you in there,
All right.
Jack.
Peace.
Amazing. Bye, Jack. So, Kenneth, man, we are interested in this question about unity, which is, the tent. How does El-Sayed win over potentially skeptical, more moderate folks who, are like, oh, maybe I'll vote for Mike Rogers or whatever? How does he think about that?
You know what? I was actually thinking while I was in line to the event, this reminds me a lot of 10 years ago of, me being on the losing side. And I think our relationship in a way is really like a symbol, the kind of unity post-Hillary Bernie race that I think hopefully we'll see on this race, right? So,
I agree.
You fight hard inside of the Democratic primary. This is the most expensive Senate Democratic primary there ever was. And so naturally there's, things said, there's tough feelings on all sides. But then at the end of the day, you remind yourself of, the great big differences we have with the Republicans, and you go out and win. And I'm like really, really confident that everybody will do that. And so I feel good about it. But yeah, it does kind of remind me of that moment, the start of my career, and then how special it was to even the next cycle meet you and get to work with you and see what an amazing person you were when we were tough opponents, right before then.
See, we
can. It's not saying is he's at the victory party and you're on a podcast.
And I'm at a fucking podcast. Okay, but actually,
this is like my first time winning, so
I know it's new. Excuse us.
Can I actually, I do want to ask you on that because you sort of raised it earlier before I let you go and actually go party and get fucked up and do all the things.
There's no alcohol here, by the way. It's
You're right.
heavily Muslim.
Right.
I did see that. I saw the mocktails. Totally.
Abdul doesn't drink, which is good. We need more general election candidates who do not drink alcohol.
Who have the presence of mind. I agree. Just like Joe Biden. And so I think that the question here is like, what does this mean to progressives? Like, you have been at the center of this. You worked on Bernie's, you've worked on all these sort of big progressive challengers, and like, you guys seem poised to be in the general election. Like, what does it mean for you? What does it mean for progressives to be here, to sort of seem like you're sort of breaking through this really challenging wall in a swing state?
I think it's an opportunity and a responsibility. And the opportunity side of it is, obviously, like I just said, I haven't been on a ton of winning races, right? And so it's nice to be able to win, right? Winning is fun, but it's also a big responsibility. And winning this general election is a big responsibility because of all the consequences. And so, yeah, there's two sides of that coin. But I'm excited to have it to show what we can do and show what a message like ours can do in a state like Michigan. We'll see where the chips fall.
Amazing. Abdul, that's your number? You have Abdul by 7? All right.
In the general.
In the general.
Oh, okay.
I like it.
That's Abdul's number, not mine.
That's your Kenneth, we'll let you go back to what sounds like a raucous event. One of the best and smartest strategists in the party, Kenneth Pennington. Thanks for joining. All right, so that sounds like good vibes over there at Abdul HQ. You know, feels like they're feeling pretty confident. I've got a little bit shaping up in the Michigan 7th, where it looks like William Lawrence, 21% in, is at 40%, Richard Brink at 30%, and Matt Masdam at 0.5%. So that race certainly shaping up to be a story of ego.
It is astonishing. It's like oh man.
I got two things to say here. One, it is total lunacy that we do not yet have an app that is like ESPN scoreboard for political results. And like the person who invents that will be very popular once or twice a year.
Do you happen to know any developers who sit on large stacks of data?
No.
They're too busy droning.
Number two, I'm just gonna go right past it.
It's incredible.
Number two, I feel like this is really so uncharacteristic of moderates that like we have, like usually moderates are really good about clearing a field and getting everyone in order and being like, we are going to have one moderate who's going to win. And like the liberals are in disarray. And the exact opposite happened this year. And I think this is like the big problem. Well, it's not the big, but there's a dozen different problems, but we got to figure out our primary situation in the center because we saw it for a long time in the Senate race. We see it in Michigan 7. Looking at Wisconsin governor, it's a huge problem. And, you know, credit to the lefties for figuring it out and getting it together this year and like organizing around it. But like, if Will Lawrence wins Michigan 7, the general consensus is that seat comes off the map and it's all but lost. I don't know.
I have to say, I think that is total bullshit. I'm sorry, but I really think that maybe I'll be proven totally wrong, but like I just think that to take the same thing happened in Maine 2nd district. You know, as soon as I listen, Jared Golden was obviously like the best suited politician to run as a Democrat in that district, but like Matt Dunlap won that primary and everyone's like, oh, take it off the map. And I just think we have, for better or worse, we have not seen a lot of, progressive populist candidates running in swing districts, but to take a Trump plus one district off the map in a year that's going to be like a D+10 midterm would be crazy and like political malpractice.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan is currently on track. Matt Iglesias, I think it has been tweeting that it's D6 plus 6.5 in Michigan.
You just wanted to mention someone that gets more hate on Twitter than you do.
So wait,
right.
I would sort of feel like the Michigan Senate race would disprove this theory a little bit, right? You had one establishment and you had one progressive.
Yeah, but I think that part of the problem though is that there are a lot of things that went wrong for Haley in this race. I think one of the biggest challenges that we had was that for so long, everyone who was like centrist or moderate affiliated kind of sat on the sidelines to see who between her and Mallory were going to emerge. And that allowed Abdul to consolidate his base much more quickly. He had much more vocal online support. And it was, only after Mallory dropped, which like I give all credit to her for, I think she was trying to do the right thing. But I do think that for so long that the moderate and center lane was kind of frozen, that Haley really suffered in terms of fundraising, endorsements, support, that, I agree with you that like the Senate race could disprove that. I think for it to have the effect that we all wanted it to have, it would have needed to happen a lot sooner.
Yeah, I mean, I do disagree. And I think part of the reason I disagree is I'm not sure voters think in moderate and progressive lanes, right? I just don't know that they're thinking about that the way we are. Now, you're right in terms of marshaling resources, right?
Yeah.
From,
yes,
certainly more people might have marshaled behind Haley faster in terms of establishment organizations, but spending was not her problem in this race. She had a lot of resources, right? It was not an inability to communicate her message. I think, from everything I can tell, there was just a problem with the messenger. She didn't resonate and she didn't meet the moment for whatever reason, right?
Yeah.
And so Anyway, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it's a bad year to be a establishment coded pro-Israel Democrat who takes corporate PAC money.
Tough.
I feel like it's going to be a rough stretch for that demo for a long time.
But, I think it is hard. We, for a long time, were arguing, very similar to Joe Biden, that the internet is not real life, and that like all of the vitriol and online hatred that Haley was receiving wasn't real. And I think this is probably one of the first cycles that we're going to see where that kind of online hatred actually does matter. I think it froze a lot of our small dollar fundraising. It made a lot of potential endorsers really reticent to jump into the race because they weren't willing to take some of the heat that was going to come with it. And so for the people that were like either supporting one of our opponents or anti-Haley, that was very effective. And I think obviously we had the outside spending in our favor. And I agree with you that there was no shortage of that. But I also think that that the world has shifted a little bit in ways that are hard to measure in terms of how campaigns are communicated and won, that this is really probably the first time that somebody has been outspent by that margin and they're going to win.
Yeah, and I think that, again, I'm not trying to rip on Haley here. I think she's a good congresswoman, and Adam Wren tweeted out this note that she sent to staff today that I thought was like genuinely moving. I think she is in public service for the right reasons, and I think she's been a good congresswoman. But there were stories that start long before it was like a giant meme to rip on Haley and her accent on Twitter. There were stories. I remember one in Notice back in, I don't know, a year ago or 9 months ago.
Yeah, that was my first week on the job. Thanks.
Yeah, that was a fun time. It was a fun time to start, but it was like basically the establishment pick candidate is just, it's not landing. She's struggling. And again, I think there's two parts of it, right? And they're both real. I think one is what you said is true, that there is more of an ability now for things to migrate, jump from, Twitter discourse to real life. But two is just that, as you kind of got to at the end, it communicating now is different. It takes different forms. And there was a moment when she was like, waving away at the, sorry, I don't go on social media, and I don't, it's like, It is endearing, but it's also, well, you can't win tough races anymore and not be communicating in a compelling way online. It can look totally different to different candidates. It should be authentic to the candidate, but you can't just be like, sorry, I'm busy doing work. It's like, I mean, I respect that side of her, the workhorse side of her, but I think you have to be able to communicate compellingly online in this era.
And one of the things we struggled with was like arguing the internet doesn't matter, but then we were also, I think, frequently paralyzed by like how the internet would react to things. And, it definitely affected the way that we made decisions. And so we had all of the downside of it and none of the upside. And I do think that, this leads to a larger conversation about the world of campaigns now. And, I was at dinner earlier with someone who worked for Patty Murray. I worked for Jeanne Shaheen. I think we are entering a world in which it would be really, really hard for people like Patty Murray and Jeanne Shaheen to get elected today because they're not slick communicators. They're not great on digital, but they're incredible senators. And so how do we as a party balance that need for people who are going to go and be very good at the job they're running for with people who are also good at campaigning for that job? And that's something I stress about.
Before I come back to you on that, oh wait, wrong thing. Hold on. The technological failure.
The tabs there.
I know, seriously. Jeremy Moss winning the Democratic primary in Michigan 11.
There you go.
Another win for the Mod Squad.
Aisha pulling, 33% of the vote. Interesting.
Yeah.
I think we're getting to a point where the floor for far left candidates is about 30%. If you are a Bernie endorsed candidate, your floor is about 30%.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, this has always been my, not to, lavish praise on your former boss, Lauren, but like, this has always been part of the case I've made, for AOC. There was just an article, I think today in Politico about, like the kind of a like light bench, in the progressive lane and yada, yada. Yes, but if AOC decides to run and there are 25 candidates in the race and 23 of them are like, Josh Shapiro and Pete Buttigieg and Mark Kelly and name your moderate white guy, even if she's only polling 25-30% of the vote everywhere, like that'll win you the nomination, So
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't have any special insight on those.
Are you running?
She's not coming over for a glass of Pinot to talk about her presidential campaign with me. But look, I think Keelan's right. I think it's about 30%. We saw that in Wisconsin with Fran, who, like, when there was really no money and we all thought would never sort of get above 20, very quickly got to 33 and then 35 and then 38 and then 40. And it was like a dominant advantage and sort of like a low spend, relatively low name ID primary. So yeah, I mean, look, like I'm obviously biased, but I think like anyone who's ever underestimated her, now works with Joe Crowley. I just think like there's a lane there. And my only really strongly held belief is that she'd do what she actually want to do, because, it's not her fault that the left doesn't have a deeper bench. So I think that, yeah, that'd be really interesting.
I'm going to say something really controversial.
Oh,
I love AOC.
Yes.
Yo.
I know. No, she's further left than I am. She comes from a district that's very different from the states that I've worked in. But if you were talking about, like, as a UNC basketball fan, I say this as like, she is a Duke player that I wish played basketball for UNC. And like, she's incredible. I think she will do whatever she wants to do and she will succeed at it in politics. But I think, to your point though, she's got to decide what does she want to do with life? Does she want to stay on the Hill and rise the ranks, or does she want to run for president and maybe take a different path? I don't know. I don't know what I would tell her to do, but she's a star.
Yeah, she's also 37, so she's got a minute. Yeah. She might not even be 37. I mean, I think she is the rare person, you often hear, you have to take your shot. You have to take your shot. I think she has real staying power. And, so I think this is a decision she gets to make on her own timeline.
I just want you guys to know how sick and twisted my brain is that when you said she's 37, I immediately involuntarily was like, I don't think she turns 37 till October. And I was like, what have I done with my life that I just knew that?
That's sick.
That's fucked up.
That is twisted stuff. But can I ask though, because the AOC conversation, that brings me back to a thing we were talking about before I so rudely cut you off to tell you about Jeremy Moss, who I just heard of for the first time 2 hours ago. Congrats, Jeremy. You're huge and important. But this thing about governing versus campaigning and being so good at, communicating, and how, people who are slick and you would never be able to elect a more boring person who's good at the work. But I do want to go back to the initial thing that Lauren talked about how style and substance are sort of the same thing right now. People want fighters, people who feel like they're going to get some results and they're going to do all that. And to that end, isn't the communication part of the job? Isn't that one of the things that has made AOC so great at what she does, is that she is a communicator behind the scenes, a communicator in front of the scenes and an operator behind the scenes. And you almost can't de-link those two things. And so to me, I sort of feel like, Caitlin, I'm curious for your take on that. It feels like those two things are the exact same thing.
It's evolving, but I think, the real tension is there are people who think that the job of communicating is replacing the job of legislating. And, I think when you look at the Republican caucus, like we talked about with Liam earlier, I think the risk for Democrats is that we start electing a number of people who think their only job is to go out in front of cameras and communicate rather than actually delivering results. And, on the Republican side, you see that with Marjorie Taylor Greene, you see it with Lauren Boebert. There are still people who are able to do both. But I think, part of the bet that we made in Michigan was that Michigan voters still wanted somebody who was like going to be a Debbie Stabenow or Gary Peters style senator, who was going to be unglamorous, was going to work really hard, was never going to be a national figure. The numbers are looking like that's not the right bet this year. But I do think that it is something we are going to have to grapple with as a party in terms of how do you find that balance? Because, you know, you guys worked for Hillary Clinton. I love Hillary Clinton. She would have been an incredible president. She was not the best campaigner. And it's how do you find that balance?
It's something she talked about frequently. Sorry, go ahead, Lauren.
No. I mean, I understand like where this argument comes from, which is that we don't want people who are very smart and very substantive not to be able to be in office because they are not like natural communicators. I do think part of the baseline job of being an elected official and being a politician is being able to communicate at least decently, right? If you were really smart and you were like an absolute policy wonk and you can get into this stuff like nothing else, there is a place for you. But part of the job of an elected official is connecting with your constituents, and it is explaining what you are doing, and it is making an opaque process less opaque. And so I think sometimes this communication bit is described as an extra, and it's not. It's part of the job. And the idea that if you're a show horse, you can't also be a workhorse is not something I've ever found to be true. And I'm not saying that's what you're saying. I think sometimes people do suggest that. And it's like, you know, it's not something that I've necessarily found to be true.
Yeah. I think I've worked for sorry, Jesse.
No, go ahead.
The girls are talking, Jesse.
We're fighting. If you could take a break.
Yeah, can you guys go dark?
No, I mean, I agree with you that the job is to communicate. And I think that is, as a comms person, like obviously I think the job is to communicate. I just think that because I am old, when I started working in Senate campaigns and politics, Senate races were much more localized, and the ability to communicate with your constituents was prioritized. Whereas I think now the ability to communicate with small dollar donors and to go viral, there's much more emphasis on being good straight to camera versus being good in a room with your constituents or with the local TV station. And like Kay Hagan, who I love, like my favorite boss of all time, was terrible in front of a camera. She saw that red light go on and she froze and got weird. But she was the most charismatic person you've ever met in your life in a room. And so I think obviously there is an imperative for elected officials to be able to communicate and have that willingness to communicate. I do think the concern I have is that we're placing so much emphasis on the communication that we're completely ignoring whether we're like running candidates that want to do the job they're running for or whether they're able to do that effectively. And, you know, frankly, it's funny because this used to be the main line of attack against former governors running for Senate, where it's like, you're a former governor, you don't want to be a senator, you're going to hate it there. And I think now we're having that conversation with, you're a podcaster, you're great online, but do you actually want to go be a senator? And that's just something we're going to have to figure out.
Brief update on the results. We are looking at the Michigan Senate primary results from the New York Times. Abdul El-Sayed at 51.6% and Stevens at 45% with 22 of the votes in. Sort of interesting. Stevens up just 1.8% in her home county, Oakland. El-Sayed doing pretty well in a lot of the other major counties, although Wayne obviously still only at 2%, Wayne being Detroit, where Stevens is expecting quite a significant amount of vote share, though 8%. Good, but not, I don't think, where she would want to find herself. So that is the state of play there.
And the 7th congressional district race, tightening a little bit. I mean, who knows? It's hard to say, still only about 30% of the vote in, but Will Lawrence just dropped below 38%, and both Brink and Mazdam are over 30%. So kind of looking maybe like a tight three-way race. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what's in and what's still to come.
Daniel Strauss returns.
I want to bring back Daniel Strauss from the beginning of the show. He's back. How have your last couple of hours been? What'd you get up to?
I slept. I'll be honest.
You really?
I'll be honest. I've been working on a piece for, I'm going to say it, knock on wood, for Vanity Fair, completely unrelated to politics, and it's not going well. and I was up all night rewriting it, and
Oh,
so
no.
I slept a little bit.
You should try doing a live podcast to nobody, because that really changes the game. Well, curious.
You just heard my dog in the background too. Sorry.
That's okay. We've had a number of dog appearances on this show. Lauren also has a dog, by the way, who is
I do. He's excellent. He's at summer camp right now. I'm actually
Oh my gosh, I'm too.
Wow,
too
how bougie
protective.
of you, Lauren.
Yeah,
I
wow.
know. Well, summer camp is my
ask
ex-boyfriend's
Rob
house. to
where
be
he
fair.
is. You want to talk about bougie?
Champagne socialists over here.
I know. Tell me about it.
It's
No, I-
to be clear, it's a work camp. He's there. He's getting reprogrammed.
Insult
I
mines.
I guess in accordance with the stereotype, I fully took advantage of free babysitting for my dog while I went away. But dude is alive and well.
Daniel, what are your impressions watching the results, seeing what you're seeing? It's looking like
So I have
score.
actually, I'll confess, sleeping and then texting with some sources who are pointing me toward the Upper Peninsula, the UP, where El-Sayed is leading right now in a number of districts, although Luce County just started reporting, but that's less than 400 voters. And I'm saying that like I'm very familiar with Luce, having gone to school in Michigan. But a lot of these counties are places that he did not win when he ran for governor. These are places where, and some in the western part of the state, these are places where Whitmer handily trounced him too. So my impression is this is a different year. This is a different race. Analysis.
It's been interesting to see kind of the same splits that you see with Trump aligned candidates on early vote, and it looks like consistently Haley's doing really well in absentee and then slightly less well in early in-person voting, and then Abdul just cleaning up in election day voting. And so I don't know how much of that is younger voters vote later and how much of it is late breaking momentum for Abdul, but just kind of an interesting trend to monitor.
I did take a strong level of pause from an anecdote from a friend of mine from college whose mother, they're white adult women voters, not wealthy, and the mother voted for Stevens. My former classmate and friend voted for Abdul, but they both spent a fair amount of time going back and forth on that. And my friend's sister voted for Stevens, which I sort of read as a tiebreaker in a way. But depending on how this turns out tonight, I'm going to say that was clearly the sign, or anecdotes are useless, and I should have ignored it the entire time.
We love an anecdote. Yeah. Go ahead, Rob.
No, I was going to say, Lauren, I just found out a fact about your location in the world. What time is it where you are?
It is 2:50 in
God.
Fulham right now. I
My
know.
God.
When you asked me to do this, I misunderstood when I was flying to London.
Bro,
dedication.
What?
And I couldn't miss on the opportunity to go head to head with Caitlin. It's every progressive stream.
Can I ask something here that I'm dying to ask? What does unity look like, and what does real unity look like tomorrow? Hey, Alyssa Slotkin was talking about having a brunch because everybody after an election day feels better over, Wheaties. But what is fake unity? Yeah, I'm supporting Stevens. I'm supporting Abdul. And what is real unity? Like Gary Peters out doing what?
I'll say Haley is a total champ in that I have never heard her say, even for a minute, that she was not fully on board with whoever wins the primary. I think she absolutely, she means it. They're going to do this brunch tomorrow. I think there's some other event on the 6th that people are trying to do. I would not be shocked if she needs to take a week off and recuperate. But I do believe that despite all of the online rancor and teeth gnashing, Haley is going to do what she needs to do to beat Mike Rogers. And I have the utmost respect for it because I am a much pettier person than she is.
Caitlin,
But-
for sure. I like,
That
when
Caitlin, that did not
someone
come
holds a
through over the
grub
last.
for a long time,
No.
I salute them.
Yeah, and I just gotta be honest, even of all the people I've ever worked for, like every single one of them has joked about keeping a list of when we win, we're gonna remember this person and what they didn't do. And every time I've made that joke to Haley, she's like, oh, it's fine, don't worry about it. She does not hold a grudge. She's gonna do whatever it takes to beat Mike Rogers, and I tip my cap to her for that.
She will not, in fact, stick it to him.
She's going to stick it to Mike Rogers, win or lose.
Oh, goodness.
I like that.
You got to come up with a better phrase than that.
I like that.
Honestly, also a brunch after election night sounds miserable.
Terrible.
Oh,
I don't want to talk to
With
anyone
your
for a week.
opponent? Are you kidding
Brunch
me?
is not 7 a.m. Brunch is
Oh,
11.
No.
Have you
I
been to
don't
it?
say
I don't
no
know.
for
The
brunch
weather.
either.
Okay, so they would do this in Philly. And like there was like this big, I still dream about this breakfast. It was so good. There was this big restaurant in Northwest Philadelphia. After the primary, all the candidates would come together and share a meal. And that was like the coming together. And I thought the waffles were delightful. I also won, so that probably colored my experience. But I think brunch is lovely.
I love this from Slot Kid's point of view because both candidates are going to be delirious. Both candidates probably don't want to see the other person, to be honest.
They don't want to see
El-Sayed has
anyone.
2 kids, yeah, and she can just come up, having a good night's rest, feeling great, saying 2028, baby, here we go.
I mean, in her little note to staff, Haley straight up was like, and we should pray for the other Democratic candidate too, because he's put himself. It's hard to put yourself out there, and you could tell that it's genuinely how she feels. And I don't think Abdul's note to staff was like, don't forget to pray for Haley tonight.
She is the most earnest human being I've ever met, and I, as a cynic, I admire it. I don't know how she does it, but when she, when she says that, I believe that she means it.
Totally. I will say this. I mean, number one, this has been one of the most vicious primaries I've ever covered. I think number 3 on my list, and the top 2 are Republican primaries. But I will say this about El-Sayed. His campaign this side has allowed his competitiveness to eclipse sort of his almost annoying compassion that we saw in 18. So maybe that'll come out again.
Yeah,
I triggered Caitlin.
I don't know. I think they have real affection for each other, and
so they were friends. That the hug early on was real.
But I do think that some of the things he had said about both Mallory and Haley let the mask slip a little.
Yeah. Coming back to this, I do want
that was a mic drop.
Yeah, that was.
I mean, look, I think that primaries are tough. I think it's awesome that Stevens is going to campaign that hard for him. I think that's wonderful. I've heard similar things about like Wisconsin, where folks are like, no matter who the nominee is, like we're still going to run really hard for the state, and I think that that's great. It certainly has like not always been true, and I think sometimes you asked a question earlier about is it true that the left just wants to beat the center more than the right? It's deeply untrue. But I think if you're wondering why there's some resentment there, like there's a pretty clear answer, which is that, for years, I think sometimes it's underestimated, like progressives have like often tried to work with their more establishment counterparts and made real overtures and outreach because those were people that at the time had like access to power, and they tried to engage them in the normal ways and build those relationships and like work within their system. And they kind of just got consistently shoved to the side and told that they weren't realistic and that they were damaging to the party, and their concerns got ignored. And then when some of those concerns, proved to be true, and then like in 2024, when like concerns about like Gaza and the threat that might be to the party, and then it turns to be like this very real issue. Yeah, like if you sort of like push someone aside enough that when they're finally relevant, they're gonna have a little bit of attitude about it. And so I think, look, certainly no one on the left or the center has been their perfect selves, I think, in this fight. I think when these things get competitive, everyone probably says or does something that they might not have done if like cooler heads had prevailed. But this idea that like the left somehow is like uniquely like bitter or like angry or has a punch to throw, like I don't know, man. I've seen that all across the party.
Lauren, I want to let you go because it is now 3 a.m. in London. Dog, what the fuck? This is I gotta say, in many years of friendship with Lauren Hitt, this is the most depraved active friendship I've ever seen.
Where are her like midnight chicken nuggets?
Seriously,
I know, that's true. I
know.
normally am fed if I have to be up at this hour.
Yeah, that is so true. So we will let you go. I do want to ask if you had to give one piece of advice to Abdul El-Sayed before you leave, what would it be?
Oh man. I mean, I would keep that slogan. Don't change it. Money in pockets and money out of politics is very, very powerful. And I wouldn't drop the Medicare for all piece either.
Really?
Not everybody is going to agree that that's the best way to affordable quality healthcare, but it is a clear solution, right? It is you can wrap your mind around what that looks like. And I think in this moment, people are more open to people that are at least presenting them a real choice than someone who's going to sort of speak vaguely to quality, affordable healthcare for all. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think he needs any advice from me. I think what he pulled off tonight was pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of got at this earlier, but I do think too, I mean, it's been such a central part of his campaign. I do think that there's a way to, I have wished that some of our progressive candidates would back away from, bad tweets from 2020 or whatever. I think it's different. There's a room to say like
Thanksgiving does suck though. I have to be honest. It's not,
right,
it's
right.
the inferior feast holiday.
There is room to disown that stuff, but I do think you're going to disillusion people if you win a primary and the next day you back away from the core premises of your campaign. So I do agree with that.
Yeah.
Lauren Hitt, thank you for debasing yourself and being on the
You're
show. Go get some rest.
We'll pull you back in an hour when we have more results.
I'm
I'll do the morning report. Yeah.
The morning.
All right.
Thank
Bye,
you so
guys.
much.
I do want to turn, it is interesting, the election results still coming in for El-Sayed.
Race still alive.
We're talking about this as a foregone conclusion, as if it is over. They haven't called the race yet. A couple of reasons why.
Only
Jack
20,000
Donini.
votes.
It's pretty tight. Stephen's doing much better in mail-in ballots, at least why they haven't called it yet. Stephen's doing much better in mail-in ballots, which have been lagging behind a bit in reporting. And she's doing well enough in the small and mid counties where winning Detroit by a lot would bring her close. And so, you're sort of counting on Wayne. And so really a lot of this is going to depend on, what comes in late, which Caitlin, you talked about being what the Stevens campaign is really hanging on to.
I was happy to see how well she's doing in Western Michigan. I think there's been a lot of Western Michigan has always kind of been like the major variable in the Senate race, simply because it gets less attention. The political infrastructure for the Michigan Democratic Party like lives and dies in Detroit. But Western Michigan is where you get a lot of, I think, professional class Democratic voters, former Trump or like never Trump Republicans. I think you see a lot more of those voters in Western Michigan who are like new additions to the Democratic Party and are probably a little bit more moderate, a little bit less tied into both the baggage of the factions, but then also are less likely to be liberal. So, we're keeping an eye on it. When I talked to her campaign manager today, I asked how he felt, and we might shock people. And, I think, obviously we would have, we'd love her numbers in Detroit to be like bigger across the board. But the fact that the race hasn't been called, it means she's got a fighting chance.
Yeah, another pretty good drop for Stevens, winning the election day vote in Shiawassee County by 12 points, which helps narrow the race. Really, the theme of the night being she is overperforming in these rural counties, which is really carrying this. So the race getting tighter, even as we've been talking, which is interesting. And, I think does sort of undercut a little bit of the, El-Sayed coronation situation. Does Mallory McMorrow run over to Stevens HQ? No, I don't think so. Going to come down, of course, to Wayne late.
It
Seems to be the
is-
theme.
It is. I must admit, I like to, hold myself accountable here, but it looked early like he was going to run away with this thing, and it has just slowly narrowed. And it really is interesting to see those different splits based on, where in the state these results are coming in from. I think one of the other main complaints about the, DSA or not complaints, but just questions is like, how confined to, urban white college educated voters is that support? And so it is interesting to see people had kind of presumed that in areas where there is, a significant black vote, that those are going to be Haley's strongest counties. But, those are also counties where I think El-Sayed is pulling a ton of his support from those, young urban white college educated millennials and Gen Z. And so it'll be fascinating to see how this plays out, but closer than I expected.
I mean, look, he's the leader, right? He's leading tonight. He's been leading in the polls. I think this does speak to, there's no moral victories here, but it speaks to, I think, Haley's relentlessness, her relentless positivity, which I think, again, as the resident cynic, I was often caught off guard by.
No, we can share that title, but no, we are both petty. We're both cynical. I refuse. I strongly disagree here.
Can confirm.
But when she said she was going to run through the tape and she's going to fight for every vote, and like this is the Michigan grit that she talked about, like you're seeing it right now.
Yeah, this is fascinating.
She is going to wait until the last vote is counted to make sure that the last vote is counted, and
to make sure she may not give up and may,
Yeah, you never want to give a concession
Make
speech
sure
and
that-
then find out you're a United States senator.
I mean, not if you're going to lose by one vote.
Yeah, the numbers would have to be pretty. I mean, listen, anything is possible. The numbers would have to be pretty substantial in Wayne for her to be able to get there. But it's hey, crazier things have happened. Hillary Clinton lost.
That's been the plan all along, though, was big numbers in Wayne. So we'll see what happens.
I have to say also, I underestimated how fucking slow Michigan would be at counting its votes.
I was one of those things. It's every single time I'm like, Michigan's got its shit together this year.
They're like, we do pre-processing now. We do pre-processing. I was like, oh, good. It's going to be super fast. We had a call. Rob was like, I mean, is this going to be a thing where we're just streaming till 4 a.m? And I was like, nah, they pre-process. Wrong. Stupid. Fell for it again.
Lauren's going to wake up in the morning and we'll still be here.
She'll take over. We're like, you're doing a solo show for 6 hours.
taking calls, all night. What do you, I don't know. I'm stuck in this situation where it does seem like, look, you have Cori Bush who lost, Will Lawrence, that race is looking like it's getting a lot tighter. This race probably looks like it might be heading to be a little bit tighter than people thought. It does seem like the, progressive sweep narrative is starting to shape up to be a little bit overwrought, at least this early in the night. We've got a good question in the chat, which is, how do you think about a potential Abdul win impacts down ballot congressional races? Caitlin, I'm curious for your take on this.
Yeah, I mean, look, we heard from a lot of our friends and allies that they were very concerned about down ballot effects of him being at the top of the ticket. I think, part of the job of whoever the nominee is to make sure that they are creating an environment that allows other Democrats to win. And so, I think a huge part of our argument, more with insiders about Haley's electability, was the fact that there were these significant concerns about Abdul on House races specifically. And so part of what he's going to have to do as he figures out his general election strategy, if he wins, is figure out how to build on his platform in a way that does not hurt potential House candidates. Because I as I mentioned earlier, because of the gerrymander, because of how some of the dynamics are playing out the way they are, I don't know, I think this House majority is either going to be really big or 3 seats. And in a scenario where we're looking at a 3-seat majority, that matters.
Comrade Larrick, what do you think?
No, I mean, I think that's right. I think it is a factor that you have to consider, not whatever. I don't think voters have to consider down ballot effects of who they nominate for one race or whatever, but it tells you something if a bunch of candidates across the state who have to run in tough districts are like, dude, this is going to be a huge drain on us or really hard for us to navigate or whatever. It doesn't mean those people are always right, but it tells you something when they are like, I think it's going to be harder for me to win my race if Abdul is the nominee versus Haley, so.
But don't you think there's, just to play some level of devil's advocate here, don't you think there are just some voters who are like super not going to show up if Haley, especially given, I mean, you talked about this earlier, just the vitriol that has gone at Haley Stevens over the last 6 months. Don't you think it's possible there's a bunch of voters who may not show up and there will be, turnout problems just as much as there might be swing problems with El-Sayed?
I mean, look, I think I will be very interested to look at the final results once we have them tonight and see, how much were they able to change the electorate? How many young people did turn out? I think, again, when Zoran won, in November of 2025 in New York City, they quadrupled turnout among voters under 30. And that is just a game-changing, shift in the overall electorate of the, in his case, New York City. And so if Abdul can juice turnout like that with young people and with disaffected voters, I think that's huge. But, I think there's trade-offs to everything. And I think there are likewise probably some people who would feel comfortable voting for Haley Stevens as sort of a moderate Democrat who, doesn't feel scary, that would not feel as comfortable, and would either stay home or consider voting for Mike Rogers,
Yeah, I mean, it goes both ways. I think it's incumbent on the winner of this primary to focus on that unity message that, frankly, Daniel was talking about earlier. And like, winning campaigns are about addition, not subtraction. And so whoever wins tonight is going to have to figure out how to both mend fences with their opponents, various factions. And there may not be a lot of bad blood between the candidates, but there is a lot of bad blood between their supporters. And they're going to have to figure out how to bridge that divide, but then also how to go out and also add swing voters. And I think that is what makes some of this math really hard.
I also think related to this, that this entire cycle and this Senate race is a cautionary tale to national committees deciding to endorse in primaries, depending on the year you're in. Just because, to me, correct me if I'm wrong, operatives, I'm the only freelance journalist right now. But like,
we're all media now, bro.
Yeah, we're independent we're a little bit independent journalists ourselves.
Look, I mean, to me, correct me if I'm wrong here, Schumer's in a weird position because El-Sayed wins, he runs hot. El-Sayed is like, I remember how hard you pushed the scales against me. I'm not going to listen to you. Stevens wins. El-Sayed's supporters, regardless of what he says, are like, I'm not listening to you guys. This was rigged or something. There's going to be some. So either way, there's a subtraction in some way coming out of this. And then it's just an electorate. This cycle, the party, this cycle is very, very suspicious of the larger traditional democratic infrastructure. That's not always the case, but boy, oh boy, I gotta think if Gillibrand and Schumer could do it over again, they really wouldn't have endorsed in this cycle, having known what we've seen now.
Well, they didn't necessarily endorse until very recently. And
in Michigan?
Yeah.
Well, it was well known who they were supporting. But see, they didn't publicly endorse.
They didn't publicly endorse, and so I think this is one of my takeaways: is that if you're like, if they're going to do a light endorsement, or if you are going to be tagged as the establishment candidate, you just have to go all in. You can't do the half in, half out, where like
a light endorsement, I think, is even worse. You're right.
The what endorsement?
I think a light endorsement is worse.
Yes, because you're not getting any of the benefits, but you're getting all of the baggage. And I think this is the first time where this has been like a real problem for Democrats. And so I have a ton of sympathy for everyone who's trying to navigate this. But, if you look at Roy Cooper or any of the other like moderate candidates who've been able to clear the field, they get Sherrod Brown, for example, they get the benefit of a field program, they get DSCC support, they get access to fundraising. For a long time, Haley was in this spot where the DSCC was very deliberately not publicly endorsing her. So she didn't get access to those benefits, but she still had to answer for the establishment every single time. And so, when I used to talk to people about this in the context of Emily's List, I would interview with campaigns. They're like, well, should we take the Emily's List endorsement? They're going to call us baby killers. It's like, look, they're going to call you baby killers anyway. So you might as well take the money and the support because that's what you believe. Whereas I think now you have to have that calculus with the establishment where it's like, if we're going to be the establishment candidate, how do we use that to our advantage in a way that it's not just an albatross?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that we've seen this in a couple of races now on the House side too, where the D-Trip has come in heavy-handed toward the end of races and their candidates lose. And then to your point, Strauss, they're just breeding even more resentment amongst a base that is already so disillusioned by the establishment. Yeah. So it's a dicey moment. I'm inclined to think at this point we're better off just having the establishment stay out of races and saying like we are here to put whatever resources are needed for the nominee when the nominee wins.
I don't know, Jesse. Having just said all of that, I've seen cycles on the Republican side where Chris McDaniel versus Thad Stevens. I think Chris McDaniel would be in the Senate right now if the NRSC hadn't gone in hard. I don't. It could be. Yeah.
The DSCC,
a spoiler candidate, and there's no national party coming in. I don't know, man.
Chuck Schumer and the DSCC, to their credit, they are ruthless and very unemotional about who can win, why they think that person can win. And so if they think that there is somebody who is clearly a Todd Aiken type candidate, they're going to do what they need to do to win. And at the end of the day, part of the reason that candidates have so much leverage against the establishment is that tomorrow Senate Majority PAC is going to drop whatever it takes in Michigan to beat Mike Rogers, regardless of whether Abdul El-Sayed wants it or not, or Haley Stevens wants it or not, because they are focused on winning the seat in a way that I think is less about ideology and it's just more about math.
Wrong.
APAC debate.
I do want to talk about one big factor in this race when you talk about the spending and all of that. I mean, Teddy Schlieffler has a rack and stack of the outside spending. 6 groups spent $62 million for Stevens, giving her a 9-1 spending advantage over Abdul. Half of that came from APAC, and APAC spent more than any federal group. First of all, this feels counterproductive to me. It does feel like this was a negative factor in the race. I mean, Caitlin, I'm sort of curious, what's your view on this? It was obviously materially, I don't even know if it was materially helpful, but it was materially supportive. And I don't know. We'll have to see if she, pulls it out tonight, but it does feel like it became a reasonably helpful narrative in the race.
I'll say a couple things. One, Haley's support of the state of Israel is an authentically held belief. She is not a Zionist or an Israel supporter because she thinks AIPAC is going to spend money on her. And I think that those were some of the attacks that she had to deal with and face, which, bordered on very anti-Semitic. But, at the same time, part of that bargain is that the expectation that AIPAC was going to spend for her, I do think that it cuts a little bit both ways in the sense that it would be a lot cleaner and easier if AIPAC was not putting their name on all of their outside spending. But at the same time, as we saw very early in the outside spending race, when the outside spending started in, I think, late April, early March, or late April, early May, anything that was not specifically affiliated with AIPAC was tagged as AIPAC. And so she was always going to carry that burden regardless of whether AIPAC publicly or privately was doing this funding. I think the bigger lesson that I have taken from all of this is that, and I'm curious your guys' thoughts on the 2016 experience, is that on the Stevens campaign, we allowed Abdul and Mallory to a lesser extent to make this race almost singularly about Israel and Palestine. And part of that was we didn't want to elevate our opponents. We didn't want to elevate the issue, but we did give them the space to go out and make that the singular issue of this race in a way that by the time we got to outside spending, that was all anyone was talking about. I also think, as I mentioned earlier, this is like a new kind of frontier where that kind of outside spending isn't working. Daniel, I don't know if you can think of a race where that kind of outside spending didn't work the way that we all thought it would.
The scale of money spent is makes it difficult, but no, I mean, that's one of the things that it's bizarre.
And so the assumption was always that regardless of what the earned media narrative or the social media narrative would be, the TV spending and the paid media spending would outweigh all of that by orders of magnitude. And that just didn't happen here.
Yeah, I do think it was a unique race in terms of the degree to which it became the APAC of it all. I think, they are uniquely toxic in this moment. And it was such a known factor about the race. I think so much of, to your point, when this stuff is most effective is nobody really knows it's happening. You just know that they're experiencing a bunch of ads, highlighting a bunch of bad records, scary things about someone or whatever. But when the narrative is so deeply set in that it then neuters the ads themselves, and instead people are seeing the ads, they're like, oh my god, another fucking APAC ad, what is wrong with these people? So I haven't really seen that in the past, but I do think we're going to see more of it. You're seeing in a lot of these House races too. It's not just the APAC money is the most toxic, but people are trying to do this with the AI money, with the crypto money. And it does feel like it's turning a corner where in Democratic primaries with informed voters, who are following this stuff, they're like, fuck that. Oh, this is the guy that's propped up by, leading the future, or this is the guy that's propped up by Fair Shake, So it'll be interesting to see how pervasive that becomes.
Taking a look really quick at Kalshi, the truth market. And you can see over the last maybe, 40 odd minutes, maybe an hour, the odds ever so slightly going down for Abdul and ever so slightly rising.
This is the needle,
Haley.
Guys. This
is
the
needle.
We're surging.
But people have, when people
market.
have a
You're
vested
feel
interest
bad when
in
you
it.
do surge, and that sarcasm is gonna.
I don't think
they
are surging. You don't see a lot of needles go from 99.9% down to
now. Just realize that this is the needle all over.
It's the needle, but tons of degenerate 19-year-olds are about to have to go to rehab, so it's way more fun. The needle
that's dark.
They're getting a different kind of needle,
Yeah, exactly. I will say it is shaping up to be a very long night here.
Great.
And I will say longer than perhaps we anticipated going on.
I mean, he's been leading the entire night by about 20,000 votes. That does augur for closeness.
Yeah,
but
look,
the expectations.
You heard it here first.
The real question is, how drunk are Jack Koch, Giorella, and Kenneth Pennington
they're realizing there's no booze there?
I know.
Hey, I've been at booze-free, events where there's booze.
Yeah.
Go across the street, get a 6-pack.
Yeah, exactly.
I was drinking Fireball to the face in the Javits Center on election day 2016.
I think that's what
I remember
Lightfoot did after she lost. She went and there were photos, and she went out and bought, a lot of beer.
Yeah, I remember at the Javits Center, I and a colleague ran down to the concession stand and bought out all of their $20 beers and brought them up. And
that wasn't enough.
By the time I came back, the situation had not improved.
You truly don't understand despair until you are in a boiler room under a glass ceiling that was chosen for the, metaphor of breaking it, watching Donald Trump become president, just fucking mainlining cinnamon whiskey.
Yeah, that's right.
The only thing about that night that I can moderately compete with is I had surgery the day before, and I was in a lot of pain, but I was like, I'm not going to take my afternoon pain meds because I want to be fully with it to experience. And then at 9:00, I was like, I'm taking the Vicodin. Thank you.
Yeah. You're like, do you have any more anesthesia? Wake me up in 4 years.
Another batch of votes in for the Michigan Senate race. This is in Midland County, a rural county. You have Haley Stevens. Pretty good results, really outperforming on election day vote. El-Sayed doing pretty well on early vote. This is also another kind of disappointing result for El-Sayed as the night goes on. Still feels more likely to me than not that he's going to pull it out, but that the margins will be tighter than we thought.
It's not going to be 15.
It is not going to be 15, certainly, which many people were saying.
Yeah, I was saying
that it's very possibly going to be, and still very much an active pathway to victory for Haley Stevens.
Again, not to roast Abdul, because he's run like normally you're doing from the operative perspective.
Hey, Jesse, look at the times.
What is the times?
Abdul 48%, Haley Stevens 48%.
That's their current estimate. That's the current vote total. Well,
we'll
tight.
See what happens. We're tight, baby.
But from the operative perspective, having worked in comms, normally you are doing expectation setting that the El-Sayed folks did not do. He has been projecting nothing but, over the top confidence and talking about what margin he's going to win the general election by, and, how he's going to use his position to, seed the ground for a progressive 2028 presidential candidate. And so now if he wins a 2-point race, which is still a remarkable accomplishment to win a race against Haley Stevens and the Democratic establishment and Mallory McMorrow and whatever, it's just like the expectations were that they were going to roll tonight, and they didn't really do anything to push back on that, and just takes away from some of the momentum coming out of this if he does prevail. And if they lose, then it doesn't matter what the expectations were, because you're going to be a fake physician again or whatever.
Yeah. It does. I mean, this is a little bit the thing, right? I mean, El-Sayed talked this big game about how he was, the ultimate fighter, and he was gonna whatever, come at me, bro. And right now it's not going to be that. So what? I don't know how that fully changes the story about how he goes into a general, but I do think if this ends up being tight, it is it sort of damages a little bit of that narrative.
And again, we're kind of I don't know that we're going to get that. Everyone wants to, I mean, we may get it in November, the answer to the question about are progressives ascendant and they can win everywhere. And, but every time you think there's a clean narrative developing on that front, it's, you'll have these races in Colorado and, New York City where there's massive momentum on the left and Fran Hung is doing great. There's also been a bunch of races, Josh Turek winning in Iowa and Javier Becerra winning in California. And, there have been antidotes, and there's not, I don't think, going to be a clean takeaway from this primary season that's like the left has won or the center has won, just going to be murky.
Yeah, although I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. I would say, I guess I throw this back at you. Let's say Haley Stevens pulls this out. Possible. Still possible.
Certainly
possible. What then are how does that change that question about what's progressive, and is this a big progressive summer? Does this stall them? I mean, what is that world?
Yeah, no, I mean, go ahead, Caitlin.
If Haley wins, the establishment is dodging a big fucking bullet here. And I think that you have to give credit to the insurgents all over the country who are making these primary races much closer than, frankly, they should be. I think this is, first of all, very healthy for us as a party to go through this. But I also think that the biggest risk we face, whether the establishment wins or progressives win, is to read any of this as a mandate for anything other than wanting to be Donald Trump. And so my fear coming into November is probably the same as Jesse's, which is I think after 2018, we misread the mandate. We thought that, woke free for all, that's what the people voted for. We have to be really kind of sober about what's at stake and like how pissed off people are at Democrats, and just acknowledge that they're just a little bit more pissed off at Republicans if we pull this off.
I think that's right.
I think, yes, this is one of my biggest frustration with elections is you win by 1 point and everyone is like, see, this is what we should have been doing all along. And you lose by 1 point and everyone's like, see, these people are fucking idiots. And like, we should do the exact opposite of whatever they did. And in reality, there's a million factors that go into every election and they all come together and you come away, it comes down to 10,000 votes in one part of the country. And you're like, it's hard to know what to learn.
I mean, literally, my first race was 2004 in Alaska, and it was there was a blizzard in Western Alaska, so they couldn't fax the ballots or something. It was like the kind of stuff that comes up and affects the outcome of races is just like, none of us are as smart as we think we are. Our opponents are not nearly as dumb as we say Lauren is all the time. I'm just kidding. She's great. But yeah, the issue that we have consistently is this desire to find a meaning that is larger than what actually happened. And if Haley wins, this was a close fucking race and Abdul ran a really, really good race. And what that means is that Haley has a big swath of the Democratic Party that she has to go and convince to come turn out for her in November.
Well, it is 10:30 and the race remains and we said 10:30 was going to be our limit. So we are going to put a pin in this conversation and come back to it when we have some results tomorrow. As of this moment, the sort of implied modeling from some of the prediction markets is still sort of indicating a 4% Abdul El-Sayed win, much tighter. El-Sayed win, much tighter than people had been predicting, but still tight. And Haley Stevens with some, a serious pathway still as the night goes on. We will have more coverage on this, of course, and more discussion, but I do want to say thank you to Caitlin Legacki for riding with us and not rifling too far through my emails to get my most embarrassing things. She could have done that. Daniel Strauss, thank you for joining us from your West Library. We really appreciate it. And Lauren Hitt, who is hopefully in bed all the way from London.
But her adrenaline is still pumping because she was so excited to be a part of this. She's still wide awake.
And for all of you for watching with us, thank you so much for being part of this live extravaganza. And we will have more as this unfolds. Have a great night.
Nobody knows anything.